You win that fucking
canary. Tick, tick, tick. Do you recognize the sound as the grains count down? Trickle down right in front of you. Tickle, tickle, tickle on your neck. Hairs prickle as they barbecue the something underneath the right in front of you. Hourglass smashed, a million little pieces. The countdown carry on. 5, 4, 3, 2.
You are listening to Free Talkcast, where we talk about news and current events from a perspective of peace, love, and liberty. I'm your host, Aria and let's get right into things. Welcome to this week's episode of Free Talkcast. I'm joined this week by Rachel Blackfyre, former vice chair candidate for the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, which seems to be going the opposite direction of what we would have liked to see, but that's not surprising with the Trump administration doing what it's doing. Rachel, thank you for sitting down with me again this week.
The convention did not go the way we wanted, and the Trump administration is also going similarly dumpster fire. So
I'm a bit conflicted on the Trump administration, and that's largely what I want to discuss today because I'm a little concerned. I'm more than a little concerned about the Trump administration and some of the things that they are doing. And a lot of libertarians, perhaps even most, voted for Donald Trump because he had promised to free Ross Ulbricht. And to his credit, Donald Trump did, in fact, free Ross Ulbricht, and that's wonderful. And I don't want anything I say to be construed as I wish Ross Ulbricht wasn't free kind of remark. I'm thrilled that Ross Ulbricht has been freed. I've been arguing for his freedom for 10 years or so now. I don't remember exactly how long. But I've been arguing for his freedom as long as I've known about the case. And I'm thrilled that he is finally free. However, it came at a really high cost. And I'm not sure I'm seeing anything from libertarians that suggests that they're aware of what they did. And what they did, as far as I can tell, is they traded one man's life for a great deal of evil that is now being done. For example, the Trump administration has deported to El Salvador prisons a guy who they were prohibited from deporting to El Salvador because he had a protection order. You know, he was fleeing the gangs, or I don't remember all of the case details off the top of my head, but he was essentially fleeing the gangs in El Salvador, and he came to the United States seeking refuge. And as far as we can tell, he was not a gang member, not even a criminal, and now has been deported to prison in El Salvador, which the status of these prisons is horrifying. They are full of human rights violations. It is torture. And this is obvious. Why would the Trump administration want to deport people to other prisons instead of just leaving them in prisons here in the United States? A lot of people might make the case, well, we shouldn't, fund the imprisonment of these people, but the Trump administration is paying El Salvador for this. So the taxpayer in the United States is paying for this regardless, whether the prison is here or in El Salvador. The reason that they prefer these prisons in El Salvador is because they're significantly more brutal than any prison in the United States can be. They are full of human rights violations. The living conditions are horrific. And it's a form of torture, as far as I can tell. Sending these people to El Salvador is torture, and it's evil. And it's happening. The entire situation was a mess because a judge ordered the Trump administration not to do this. They said not to deport any more people to El Salvador or something to that effect, and the Trump administration fought it. And despite the judge's order, they went ahead and deported like 300 people, I think this was several weeks ago, to El Salvador anyway. And this was when it became clear to me that the judicial branch had no real ability to hold the Trump administration accountable. They can't charge Donald Trump with contempt of court. Now, if you or I were told by a judge, don't do this thing, and then we did it, we would be charged with contempt of court, and we would be thrown in jail. They apparently can't do that to the Trump administration. They can't do it to Donald Trump, and apparently they can't do it to the people who are making these decisions. The judicial branch, for all of these talks of checks and balances that we heard while growing up, is completely toothless and unable to do anything about the Trump administration other than wag its finger and say, no, you should not have done that. for example, they deported this guy anyway, and then the Trump administration, strangely, even though they've admitted that they should not have deported Kilmar Garcia, I believe that's what his name was, they don't want to fight to get him back. They're like, no, we were wrong, we shouldn't have sent the guy, but, oh well, we're not going to try to get him back. Even though the judge has ordered us to try to get him back, we're just going to say, well, El Salvador is a sovereign country. What do you expect us to do about it? And there's nothing the judge can do. His hands are tied. He can't say, look, try harder, or I'm going to throw you in jail. It's completely toothless. And I think that's terrifying because it opens the Trump administration to literally violating American laws. Laws against torture, indefinite detainment of American citizens, laws against deporting American citizens. When this idea was first floated of the Trump administration sending people to prisons in El Salvador, I expressed the concern that this would ultimately be used to deport U.S. citizens. And I remember, Facebook deleted my account for unknown reasons, but I could probably go to that thread, if it still existed, and quote the very people who said, you're being an alarmist. Trump would never do anything like that. They're talking about deporting El Salvador people back to El Salvador, and you're making a mountain out of a molehill. And then the Trump administration this week has deported not one, but 3 U.S. citizens to Honduras. So U.S. citizens have officially been deported by the Trump administration. And this opens up the possibility that any American citizen can be deported. Now, it's obviously illegal to deport an American citizen. This is horribly illegal. There are obvious laws against it. It's unconstitutional. It's specifically prohibited by American law to deport American citizens. And the Trump administration has done it anyway. And there's nothing the judicial branch can do about it. And I think all of these things together, we have a lot of canaries in our coal mines, so to speak, that are dropping. They are dropping left and right. All of our warnings about the approach of tyranny and something similar to the regime of Adolf Hitler, where massive human rights violations is imminently possible. I'm not saying it's going to happen or that the Trump administration is going to round up people and throw them in FEMA camps or anything like that. I don't know if he's going to do those things or not. But for the first time in American history, it is not only possible, but we have a president who is willing to break the law in order to do it, because he knows that he cannot be held accountable for it. And that scares the hell out of me. What about you, Rachel? What do you think about this situation we have here with Donald Trump?
I mean, yeah, the Constitution has significantly failed to prevent increasing tyranny, and it's being completely ignored right now by the president. One option, I'm pulling up the Wikipedia about it right now, impeachment actually is still an option, but that would require the House of Representatives to support it, and I believe they're currently a Republican majority, so things would have to get so bad that the GOP is rejecting Trump to a large degree, because that's just how much is required to achieve impeachment. Yeah. And the president can be removed for if he is impeached on treason charges, which there's a case to be made there.
That violating the American Constitution would absolutely qualify as treason, right?
Yeah. I don't know if that will happen. The last person to be impeached and to face removal was Nixon, and Nixon just resigned after he was impeached by the House.
It seems very unlikely to me that Donald Trump will be impeached. I mean, he's been impeached before, but not removed from office. And I don't remember what the results of that impeachment were. I think he was actually impeached twice. The whole thing back then seemed to me like showboating from the Democrats. Mm-hmm. Certainly with a Republican-led House, and I think even a Republican-led Senate, we're not going to see the Trump administration being impeached these days. I mean, it's just not going to happen. It's possible that the evils being committed by the Trump administration will spur Democrats to come out in 2026 and elect Democrats in droves. It's also possible that the opposite will happen. But even then, I'm not sure that the Democrats are going to be willing to impeach Donald Trump again. After all, I think they've tried not once, but twice and failed to remove him from office. I do like, I am relieved to know that there is at least some recourse that the political system has, I guess, as unlikely as it is. I had forgotten, honestly, that impeaching the guy was even a possibility. I'd forgotten that he could be impeached and removed from office. And I'm not sure, based on what we saw, was it 5 years ago? Well, 4 years ago. I'm not sure, based on what we saw 4 years ago, that Trump at this point would actually be willing to stand down if he was impeached. We saw on January the 6th of, I think, 2021, a lot of people protesting in the Capitol and going into congressional buildings and having an unauthorized tour of the Capitol building, encouraged to do so by the Trump administration. And I think that is a prelude to what could happen if Trump is impeached and removed from office, only there's probably significantly more of those people now than there were on January the 6th. And they are more, not militarized, but they are more agitated than they were 5 years ago. The American political climate is terrifying. I don't know why people are so partisan and so bitter and so angry about everything and everyone else. For example, yesterday, I was in the grocery store with my boyfriend, minding our own business. We were actually looking at strawberries. We just minding our own business, looking for the freshest little package of strawberries. And this lady comes from like 4 aisles down, walks past me and says, "Oh, how nice. It must be dress up day," and walked away. And I didn't even know what she said. I knew it was rude by the tone of her voice, but I was paying attention to strawberries, so I wasn't really tuned into what this lady was saying. However, Carrie heard it, and he told me what she said, and I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty messed up. That's bold, too, to walk by someone who's minding their own business, grocery shopping, and say something like that. But whatever. We continued grocery shopping. I bought some tofu and other things because the tofu section was right there. And then we continued going up and down aisles, and we found the woman literally waiting at one of the ends of the aisles that we were going down. Like, she saw us coming down this aisle, and she literally waited for us to come back through there. I didn't even know she was there, but she was there waiting, apparently. And so I walked past her, pushing my cart. I wouldn't have even recognized the lady, I don't think. And she said something else about playing dress up or something to that effect, in the same sort of condescending, sneering tone. At which point I stopped, as did Carrie, and I said, "Is there a reason that you're going out of your way to insult me? Is there a reason that you've now gone out of your way twice to insult me? Like, why are you harassing me?" And I don't remember what she said at that point, and I responded that she's being a cunt, because, she was. And when I told my best friend this, who is a cis girl, her exact response was, "Wow, what a cunt," right? So, and the lady predictably responded, "You're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to be a woman. So why would you use a word like that?" To which I said, "Well, you're being one, obviously." And at this point, I realized I should be recording this crazy shit. So I grabbed my phone and and asked again, "Why are you harassing me?" And she said something there's video of this part, by the way, because obviously I was recording. And she said something like, "You're so beautiful. Yes, it's because you're so beautiful," or something like that. She put her head up and walked away.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Is there a reason you're harassing us as we're just doing our shopping?
Hi. Yes, because you're lovely.
Yeah, thank you.
She absolutely is.
And I turned for a moment to watch her walk away, where her stupid little son turned his head, not wanting to be in the video. But after she said, "Well, it's because you're so beautiful," I said, "Okay, well, thank you. Have a nice day." And I stopped recording and started walking away, but she didn't stop there. And I learned from this experience to not stop recording so quickly. That was stupid of me, and I knew better. But I was like, "Okay, thank you. Have a nice day." And I turned to walk away. She kept going, and I don't remember exactly what she said, but Carrie said back to her, "Yes, she is amazingly beautiful," or something like that. "Oh, thank you. That's very sweet of you." And she turned and she hunched over in a really weird kind of child having attention, like she's about to start stomping in the grocery store kind of way. And she shrieked, "It's not a woman, it's a man." She shrieked this. And they're in the grocery store aisle. What the fuck, lady? How crazy. of an interaction is that? Like, here you have this person who's minding their own business, grocery shopping. And this lady goes out of her way to insult me twice. And when I ask her why, she ends up, like, calmly, there's me in the video, calmly asking her why she's harassing me. Seconds later, she's shrieking in the aisle that I'm a man. And, like, I don't care what her opinion on this is, but I've had people tell me, well, you were asking for it, right? You're not trying to blend in with the cis woman population. You stand out, and this is the predictable result of that, which, as I'm sure people out there can deduce, is exactly like saying that a raped woman was asking for it because she wore a skimpy shirt, or a skimpy skirt, rather. And no, insulting someone in a grocery store is not equivalent to rape, but I shouldn't even have to say that, right? I should be able to use an analogy without people immediately equating the two things in terms of degree. Like, I should be able to point out that going up to someone and slapping them is immoral, as is going up to someone and killing them, without people out there being like, oh, you're crazy. You're saying that slapping someone is like killing them? I should be able to use analogies and metaphors in the year 2025 without people thinking that I'm somehow equating those two things. And this is something I've seen more and more over the years as we become more bitter and more partisan. We've lost the ability to have rational conversations. We've lost the ability to use analogies. Someone using an analogy is somehow equating the two things in terms of severity. And I can't think of an example off the top of my head, and that's a lack of preparedness on my part, because I recently got into an argument on Twitter with Dennis Pratt where he did exactly this sort of thing.
Mistake.
I'm sorry? Yeah.
The fatal mistake.
I don't know what happened with him, right? Like, he used to be a bit pompous and arrogant, as a lot of intelligent people are, but he was reasonable and you could have a conversation with him. Somewhere along the way, it seems he lost the ability to have those conversations. He became agitated.
Every conversation I've ever had with him is just like him trying to steamroll people with a wall of words. I just don't engage with him because of it. One time I fell at work, I got a concussion, and a week later I was like, I'm going to test my mental acuity, so I decided to engage with him.
How did that go?
It's like, let's see how I can respond to these walls of text, and it turns out I'm fine.
That's good.
Yeah, I when I was younger, I used to waste way more time arguing with people who just like wall of text, but I just don't have time anymore. But every now and then it's fun. What you were saying with the woman in the grocery store, like, I feel like the transphobes have just gotten fucking insane. Like, you have the TERFs who say that they are doing because they want to protect women, and like every fucking thing they do hurts cis women too. Like, when they say women don't have XYZ, like they're almost always excluding some women. Like the Nancy Mace lady just all day on Twitter. I guess she's actually in Congress too, which is terrifying, but she's just all day on Twitter. Women don't do X, and then it's something that, like, what? There's totally cis women who have that. Like, she was going off about Adam's apples, and I'm like, that's just a formation of bones. That's like, so some women have that. What? Why are we gonna hurt women that have that just to pick on trans women? It just doesn't fucking make any sense.
It is remarkable how ignorant these people are. And I've got into this repeatedly because these transphobes especially, they want to create some sort of definition that excludes trans women from their group of women. And this is a red herring. It's an impossible task for a definition to be valid, to be used to categorize different people and different things into one group or another. It has to have all of the characteristics that are both necessary and sufficient to distinguish a member of that category from members that are not in that category. And that's a bit wordy, and I don't know how else to explain it other than, if you want to give me the definition of a desk, in order for your definition of desk to truly be valid and useful as a way for me to say, okay, these items are desk and these items are not desks, then it has to include everything that we would say is a desk. And it cannot include anything that we would say is not a desk. Now, obviously, some people might say, well, it's a flat surface with 4 legs supporting it. Okay, well, that also includes a table. It includes a coffee table. It can include some stools, for example. So it's obviously not a valid definition. And I think this is where a lot of people get lost, because definitions really, they're useless to us. I don't remember where I was. Something happened and I had to cut the last few seconds, but it doesn't matter because the gist of what I'm saying is the same. We don't refer to definitions to categorize things. No one is going to look up the definition of tree and say, well, yes, this thing is clearly a tree because it fits this definition. That's not the way that we categorize things. In actuality, and there has been legit scientific study to go into this thing. There's this thing called prototype theory, not archetype, where we have these prototypes of things in our heads that we learned from early ages, and these prototypes develop and they change and they grow over time. And that is how we categorize things. We compare them to the prototype in our head. And if it's close enough, we say, well, yes, it's that thing. We don't use definitions. And this is clear when we start talking about what is a woman. That's the one they love so much, right? Because they say, well, a woman is someone born with 2 X chromosomes or no Y chromosome. And that on the surface appears to be a valid definition, except some percentage of women out there are XXY and therefore are not, XX chromosomes. But even if that wasn't the case, you don't know my chromosomal makeup. I don't know Rachel's chromosomal makeup. I don't know the chromosomal makeup of anyone listening to this episode, and they don't know mine. So how can they say that chromosomal makeup is the reason that I'm not a woman when they have no idea what my chromosomes are? And they do the same thing with gametes or gametes or whatever, which is a term that I never even heard until a few years ago when the transphobes decided that this was going to be what they used to categorize women. You don't know the size of my gametes or gametes, whatever the hell the word is. I don't know because I didn't pay any attention to it, but no one knows. No one has analyzed my blood cells or wherever these things are located to determine what size these things are. No one has ever done that. And you haven't done that for random people on the street. So do these people really expect me to believe that they're walking around with chromosomal test strips or gamete/gamote test strips and going up to random people on the street? So, excuse me, sir or madam, I don't know yet. I've got to test your gametes here before I know whether you're a sir or madam. No, you're not doing that. That's not the definition you're using to determine men from women. You're not using a definition at all. You're comparing what you understand a woman to be to the person that you're looking at. You have this idea in your head, a prototype of woman, and you're making that comparison. And in your head, a woman is someone who was, assigned female at birth, has a vagina, has breasts, never had a penis or whatever. And I'm not going to say your prototype is wrong. I don't really care whether your prototype is right or wrong, but it is your prototype. And it's no more valid than my prototype or anyone else's prototype. And I think this is why they love to point to definitions, because they think that the definition gives them some sort of objective way to say that I'm not a woman. Saying, well, my prototype of woman doesn't include you, doesn't feel as powerful as, well, the dictionary says. They're referring to some third party, some source that they view as objectively right. And they're trying to bludgeon you with that. And that's where I have the issue with it. Definitions are fine, and they can be useful to understand what a certain thing is or how that certain thing acts. But when they start becoming a bludgeon that people use to attack other people, when you start pointing to definitions of, well, look, you're not really a human being because the dictionary defines human being as a white person, which incidentally would have been the argument that people were making in the 18th century if we had this same sort of political dynamic going on in the racist era that was going on back then. They would be saying exactly that. Well, the definition here says a human being is a person with a white human. So therefore, you're not a real human being. That's all it is. It's just finding a definition that you prefer and using it to exclude people that you want to be excluded. And it's a completely invalid way of interacting with other people. There are definitions out there used by sociologists, even used by biologists, that include trans women in the group of women. They simply exist. There are countless biologists out there who would say, well, yeah, trans women are women, and there's no point in even separating trans women from the category of women. Just say women are women, and that should, by definition, include trans women, would be the argument that people, literally biologists who study this stuff for a living, would make. I've seen these biologists make this argument. And their definition is every bit as valid as the definition of the person who says, well, a woman was born a woman, or whatever arguments they would make. And as you mentioned, it does real harm to cis women when they start doing these things, because they might say, well, a woman is someone who has a womb, or who can give birth, or who has a child. And you hear these things all the time, or maybe not all the time, but I've heard these things before, where someone says, well, you're not really a woman until you've felt a life growing inside of you, and you've carried that life to its birth. Only then can you be a real woman. And like, I understand that that's a genuine social, cultural perspective to have. And I'm not ever going to say that's invalid, right? But I'm going to disagree from my own personal point of view that is how I would become a mother, but that is not how I become a woman. But some of these people, like in that example, the two terms become ubiquitous in their heads, where woman is mother and mother is woman. And that excludes every single woman out there who has chosen to never have children. Some women out there who cannot have children. I have a few friends, I don't know how many, but I have a few friends who apparently cannot have children. They've had a few miscarriages and eventually they gave up. And this is heartbreaking because they want children, and everyone that I can think of would be a fantastic mother, but they can't do that. And when people start saying things like, you don't know what it's like to be a woman until you carry a child and give birth to it, like, you are doing real harm to my friends who cannot have children. And fuck you for that. I had to get that rant out. Sorry about that. And this wouldn't have happened. This interaction with the grocery store, this would not have happened 3 years ago. Now, for some context, I live in Keene, New Hampshire. Keene, New Hampshire is a hip, quaint little college town in the southwest of New Hampshire. New Hampshire, not particularly culturally progressive. I mean, it's culturally tolerant, but it's not very progressive, which is fine. But Keene is a different beast. Keene is very much a progressive town. I'm not the only trans woman in the town of Keene, not by a long shot. It's only got a population of like 23,000 people. But I can think of at least 10 trans women who live here in Keene, and probably as many trans men, and that's just the ones that I personally know and have interacted with at some point in the past. And that doesn't include any of the people who attend the college here, a lot of which are probably going to be trans and non-binary.
That seems like pretty normal. The rates are like 1 in 100 or like 0.5% or something. So like that seems pretty average. And if you're in a like area that's known to be more culturally progressive, I feel like people who are different in some way would gravitate to that because they feel like they'll face more acceptance. You know, you wouldn't want to stay in wherever in Mississippi you're from. You would rather go somewhere where you can be comfortable being yourself.
Yep. And that's exactly how I ended up in Keene, New Hampshire. And I suspect that's true of a lot of people. But you're right. The trans population is like 0.5% of the total population. Like, we're talking, what, 1 in every 200 people, maybe even lower. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I can look it up real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and that's like rates of like dysphoria diagnosis. So not everyone with dysphoria is going to transition. And
very good point.
But like it's some really low amount. I mean, you'll run into them every now and then, but like the conservatives freak out like it's taking over when it's.
Your statistic was basically exactly right. It's 0.6%. So yeah, 0.5%, 0.6%. Yeah, you were absolutely right. And that represents, that's of adults. It's actually higher in youth, as you would expect. 1.4% of the population is transgender. And I don't think, as you mentioned, this doesn't include people who have gender dysphoria, which is a a distinction that I think is worth making, because I think that gender dysphoria is the illness, so to speak, and being transgender is the cure. And I run into resistance of using these definitions by people who have gender dysphoria and want to be treated as the gender with which they identify, but they're not doing anything to attempt to be, I don't want to say be, they're not doing anything to present themselves as the gender that they want to identify as. Like here in Keene, I ran into a person several years ago, kind of a large person who had a 5 o'clock shadow, a beard, they were out of shape, and just wearing a t-shirt and a pair of ripped blue jeans. And while interacting with this person and a mutual friend, I referred to this person as he. And the mutual friend said, well, I mean, I understand. I don't want you to, I just want you to know that you referred to her as he, but she identifies as a woman. And I can't really get on board with that. I'm more than willing to refer to them as they, them in that scenario. And I'm willing to not call them he, him. But if this person has like a full-on 5 o'clock shadow, it wasn't even a 5 o'clock shadow, they just hadn't shaved in a few days, and they're putting absolutely no effort into having a feminine appearance. Like, I'm sorry, but my prototype of woman is someone who has feminine characteristics. And that's not a valid definition, certainly, because there are plenty of like cis women out there who just don't have any feminine characteristics. And I would still say that they're women, but especially for a trans woman, the disparity, I think, happens because this person has gender dysphoria, but is not transgender. And I would argue that those are two very different things. And the person's gender dysphoria is absolutely very real, and it needs to be dealt with. And I would encourage them to transition into being a woman if they are experiencing gender dysphoria, because having the beard, that's what is not helping them. Me calling them she, her is not going to help them. It is how they view themselves when they look in the mirror that determines how they feel and whether or not they're going to be able to cope with how things are. My words should not impact them whatsoever. But I recognize that it does. And I have to admit, despite how steeled I am against this sort of thing, it bothered me. This interaction yesterday at the grocery store bothered me. And I didn't intend for the entire episode to become about this, really. But again, this wouldn't have happened under the Biden administration. It's Donald Trump emboldening these kinds of people to speak out and cause these kinds of scenes that caused this to happen.
Yeah, well, I do agree that people have become more emboldened. I feel like because Trump himself is so like cruel and callous, there used to be where politicians would have a little bit more. They would pretend to respect each other's opinions.
Yeah.
Whereas Trump is so cruel and callous, I feel like it's changed the culture to now people feel very comfortable being very rude, being very callous. Like, it's even starting to affect libertarian circles or like FSP circles. Like, when I got here, there were people who would call me a leftist just because I have purple hair or because I like supported Chase Oliver. It's like, no, like just this, my hair color has no bearing on what I believe, and I support Chase because he's not a leftist. I don't agree with the very woke people or the communist people, and he doesn't either. He wants free speech. He wants people to be able to have guns. He wants free markets.
We're in this ultra divided scenario here, and I think Donald Trump is a major factor in, like, things were already becoming very divided, but I think that has escalated under Donald Trump, where people are drawing their borders, right? The culture war is in full swing at this point. And you're either with them or you're against them, I think is how they view it. And I'm not with the right-wingers who are like, oh, you've got to no trans women in sports, which, again, is only ever an issue when the trans woman wins. When the trans woman loses, no one gives a shit. But when she wins...
Or they just make up that she won when she didn't. She came in 5th place and tied with somebody. Like, that's what happened with, I think, Riley Gaines. She tied for 5th place.
Yep. And that's another excellent example of how this harms cis women. There are cis women who have been accused of being transgender, like the woman in the Olympics, accused of being transgender because of this anti-trans nonsense that is running so rampant. And there was a boxer, I think she was actually a kickboxer, I don't remember now, but she was trans, and they were making a really big deal out of the fact that she fractured her opponent's skull, and like, wow, yeah, that's rough. It's
I have a correction. Riley Gaines was the woman who tied with 5th place that all the Fox News propped up against. Leah Thomas was the trans one, but Leah Thomas and Riley Gaines tied for 5th place, and
okay, I got
people
you.
make a big deal of it, like Leah Thomas won that meet.
That's what they did with this trans woman who, fractured her opponent's skull kickboxing or just normal boxing. And that sounds horrible, and it is. But it's kickboxing. You run the risk of having a fractured skull when you kickbox. And well, she has an unfair advantage because she was born a man. Yeah, but she's not world. She may have won world champion in that match. I don't remember now. But she's been beaten before. Her previous opponent, the person who beat her, is over there on Twitter saying, yeah, no, I fought this person, and I didn't feel like I was fighting a man. I was fighting a woman. And I fully accept this person being included in women's sports. She clearly can be beaten because here's the woman who beat her saying, yeah, this is fine, but it doesn't matter. And then you end up with the Olympic athletes being accused of being transgender because they don't fit the quaint feminine stereotypes that, yes, I would kind of want to apply to trans women, as I alluded to a moment ago, but not in a strict kind of way. Because I don't see any value in having these strict categories into which I place people in things. If it serves my purposes and it serves their purposes, sure. But if it makes them feel excluded or uncomfortable, I'm not particularly inclined to do it because I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable and unwanted. And this was my issue with the New Hampshire stupid wristband thing about the parents who wore some wristband in support of keeping trans girls out of girls' sports. I don't remember all of the specifics, but it happened here in New Hampshire.
It was in Bow. It was in Bow, New Hampshire. It was a soccer team. The team that had the trans athlete wasn't even high ranking in the league before this controversy.
Yep. And people made it about free speech. Well, they have the right to wear this wristband. And look, I'm not saying they don't have the right to wear this wristband, but let's really analyze what just happened. We have adults using their inherent power as adults to bully a child and make the child feel unwelcome. And I don't really care if it's a matter of free speech or not. That is so messed up. And from a moral standpoint, you shouldn't be willing to side with someone who is intentionally going out of their way to make a child feel unwelcome. I can't imagine doing that. My morals will not allow me to support an adult who is targeting a child and trying to make that child feel like Rudolph, who doesn't get to play in the reindeer games. That's so messed up.
Yeah. I hate how politicized these things become because it's been politicized to the point where we have one side that's trans women can't be in sports at all, and the other side just doesn't want to have any standards. I want this to be left up to the sports leagues so that experts on the sport, endocrinologists, or people that specialize in muscular bone stuff, the people who know this stuff, they know how transition affects things, they know how the sports works. I want those people to be able to make standards for each league and each level of each sport and each level of the sport, because some sports are totally fine being co-ed. Cheer, biological women practically have an advantage there because they retain flexibility longer. With cheer and gymnastics, that's being a biological woman's the advantage there. And there are other sports where there is going to be an unfair advantage if someone's completely untransitioned. But then there's going to be sports where, like, if we're talking college or adult level sports, someone who's transitioned, like, their muscle and fat, like, distribution changes so much that, like, with one sport, it actually, they kind of do belong in the women's league. And then there may be other sports where the growth advantages, if someone went through male puberty, it's going to give them a permanent advantage, and maybe then they shouldn't play there. But, like, we can't even have these discussions and allow the experts in the sports and the experts on how hormones affect someone's body have these discussions if we just pass a blanket ban.
Yeah. Well, this episode has gone on a bit longer than I intended already. I want to say thank you again for sitting down with me. And I didn't intend to be for this episode to be about, this incident I had in the grocery store yesterday, but I think it's worth calling attention to because it's one of the signs that things are changing. This would not have happened here 3 years ago. I can almost guarantee that this woman has seen me in the town of Keene prior to yesterday. She has almost certainly seen me before, and she has never done this to me. And she's certainly seen other trans women, a lot of whom don't look as feminine as I do. And they're not wearing, really awesome makeup, and they don't have really long hair or whatever characteristics you associate with being feminine. She hasn't done this to them, but she's been emboldened. And the Trump administration is doing that. And the Trump administration is frankly emboldened by the inability of the judicial branch to do anything about their behavior. It concerns me how hateful people have gotten toward one another and how they don't treat one another with love and compassion because they're different or they have some characteristic they don't like. Oh, well, that person's a criminal and therefore they don't deserve to be treated right. And Max Stirner remarked on this back in like the 19th century. I think it was the 19th century in his book, The Ego and Its Own, where he remarked that nothing is quite so damaging to a person's humanity as being labeled criminal. And there's more today than there were in the 19th century. Labeling someone homeless is completely damaging to their humanity because a lot of people stop viewing homeless people as people. In fact, they don't even call them homeless people. They're just homeless. Oh, the homeless over there. You mean the homeless person, right? It's inherently dehumanizing. And we have the same thing going on with criminal. And it's been going on for a very long time. Being a criminal doesn't mean a person stops being a human. No one ever stops being a human. Even this lady at the grocery store yesterday, still a human being deserving of love and compassion. I wish she wasn't a hateful, vile person, and I hope she changes, but she is still deserving of love and compassion. And I don't wish for her to be the recipient of any sort of harm any more than I want myself to be the recipient of some sort of harm. And I hope that we can all come to that place where we're only genuinely hoping for the best for each other instead of hoping for the worst. So strive for that. Strive to hope for the best for other people. Try to see the best in other people. Try to see their humanity and hope that they succeed and have a happy life. And if you can't do that, and if you're unwilling to do that, then you need to spend some serious time reflecting on yourself to determine why you're so unwilling to extend peace and love to your fellow human beings. That's all I got for today. Rachel, would you like to add anything? Sorry, I feel like I talked a lot through this entire thing.
You're fine. You're fine. Basically, like, I think the problem with all of the cultural stuff, and, like, it baffles me that libertarians fall for it. People just need to live and let live. People need to realize that not everyone's path to happiness is going to be the same. People are vastly different. And I think, like, we're really dropping the ball as a movement by not being the answer to the culture wars, because the answer to the culture wars is to let people live their lives. As long as everything they're doing is consensual, people should be free to do what they wish. And I feel like we're really dropping the ball now because the libertarian movement in itself has become so culturally factioned, when what we need is to be presenting the answer, which is that we have to let people live their own lives.
I agree with that entirely. And thank you again for sitting down with me. I hope we can do it again soon. And I hope to get Justin on as well, because I feel like it's been a really long time since he's been on since I've seen him on any show at least. So thank you again for sitting down with me. I'm going to end the video here. And do you have a website or anything like that you would like to direct people to?
I'm just on x.com and I'm on TikTok. It's Libertarian Nico, LIBERATARIONNEKO. I'm on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I'm fine dead naming Twitter.
Yes.
TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. Those are the places people can find me. I mostly just do like TikTok style videos on YouTube and Instagram with the Reels feature, and with Twitter, it's just